who treats adults, adolescents, and children in her private practice located in Gurnee and Park Ridge, Illinois. She's a member of the Orthodox Christian Counseling Institute, a network of mental health professionals providing services to Orthodox Christians in the Chicagoland area. Dr. Anderson completed her PhD in psychology at the University of Chicago and her clinical psychology training at the University of Chicago Hospitals and Michael Reese Medical Center. Dr. Anderson is very passionate about integrating concepts of psychology and orthodoxy in ways that can be practically applied to everyday life, and therefore she has presented on different workshops throughout the Pan-Orthodox community in the Chicagoland area. And we are extremely blessed to have her tonight as she will speak to us on a very modern topic, and that is having a great Lent at any stage in life, and we can apply it to our modern days. So we're very blessed to have her, and let's give a round of applause to Dr. Randa Anderson.
Thank you. It is great to be back here with you again. I'm a little worried about this cup of water falling over. Just kidding. No cookies. So thank you all for being here this evening. I'm excited to share some thoughts and ideas with you. You may know, as Father said, I'm a clinical psychologist. What you don't know about me is that actually my doctorate is in developmental psychology, which means that I spent a lot of years studying the stages of human development. And as a clinical psychologist, I really like to help people kind of identify the unique challenges at the stage of life that they're in, and then think about ways to resolve those concerns. So I thought tonight it would be helpful to think about how we can approach Lent from the many different stages of life, certainly represented here. I see a diverse crowd of ages, and therefore there are different challenges. So whether you're a young parent with small children, or worse, hungry teenagers, or whether you're a college student or a young adult, or an empty nester, or in the older adult season of life, hopefully I will have something to offer you tonight that you will find worthwhile. So, one of my goals tonight is to be very, very practical, which Father Chris already said. And I really want us to think about the fact that we are, slide in, sorry. Okay. I really, given that we're coming up on Veneration of the Cross this Sunday, it's a halfway point of Lent, and it's a good time to kind of take stock on how things are going so far. So I'm also going to make some suggestions throughout this presentation that will help you kind of reevaluate where you are in your Lenten journey. All right. So when you think of Lent, what is the first thing that typically comes to mind? Oh, by the way, I like to be interactive, so I'm going to throw some questions out to you all too. I'm not a big fan of straight up lecture, especially not after a work day, after liturgy, and Anyway, what is the first thing that you usually think of when you think of Lent?
What you should eat.
What you should eat, or what you should not eat, right? Yeah, but really, the first thing I want us to think about tonight is that Lent is a balance of fasting, but also prayer and almsgiving, all three. Now, when I was the church school director at Saints Peter and Paul, one of the things I found was that many parents were unfamiliar with the things we were teaching their students. And so I would just love it if when people in our parishes hear about Great Lent, that rather than the first thing that always comes to mind is lentils and beans, what if the first thing that came to mind was going to church more often, attending these beautiful extra services, turning the TV off, and maybe going to help someone in need. So let's start to change our frame of mind to think about a balance of all three. Now, the next principle that I'm going to touch on throughout the evening that I think is relevant no matter what stage of life you're in is that start where you are already and then work to increase. There are guidelines the church puts forward for our Lenten fasting and prayer and almsgiving. But if you haven't been participating in those throughout the regular year, they're going to feel very, very severe and very, very hard, and you're going to try it for a week and then you're going to stop. So, if you're already fasting for meat on Wednesdays and Fridays, great. Fast throughout Lent from meat. If you've never done that before, start at a lower level and work your way up. All right. Ask yourself throughout Lent, what am I doing to grow in my spiritual life? What am I doing to grow closer to Christ? How am I intentionally changing my habits in the direction of Christ and away from my usual hustle and bustle of everyday life? These questions urge that you regularly reevaluate your efforts and keep increasing in order to avoid becoming complacent. Next, think of your Lenten practices as both personal and communal. For example, we can increase our daily prayer life by saying more prayers individually at home, that's personal, but we can also increase our prayer by attending the Lenten worship services. We can write a check to charity, that's personal, or we can take our family to someplace like Feed My Starving Children and do something that is more communal. And last but not least, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Don't overcomplicate Lent. This is easy to do if you're a cook like me and you love scoping out the latest recipes, but it's really about keeping meals simple and keeping things quieter and simpler so that you do have more time to attend the services and to do some volunteer work. Okay. So throughout the evening, I'm going to point back to these general principles, and we'll keep talking about them. Now, tonight I'm going to share some practical advice about prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, all three. And I want to start tonight, actually, by talking about almsgiving. And I'd like us to do a little self-examination on our spending habits and how they align with our almsgiving. So just as we prepare for confession by doing a self-examination, I think it's helpful to also do a self-examination of our typical spending habits. Look familiar? Anyone relate to this, right? I mean, I know for me, it's Target and it's the end caps with the 30% off signs, right? So, if someone looked over your checkbook or your credit card bill or your Amazon past orders, what would they say your spending priorities are? If you tallied up the number of different places you spend your money each month, what do you think that number would be? Number of different places. Do you ever look around your house and think, how did I get so much stuff? So your homework for tonight, we're not going to do it right now, but your homework for tonight is this little exercise. Review your finances, and in particular, your spending on non-essential items, such as eating out, those impulse Amazon buys, Starbucks, subscriptions. And I don't mean magazines because I don't think many people are subscribing to magazines anymore, but all those digital subscriptions we have, Hulu, Netflix, all of them. Then ask yourself, if your spending priorities on non-essential items align with your values. And are you spending your money where you really want to? That's part one. Part two of this homework is then to compare your spending on non-essential items, non-essential categories, to the amount you offer in your stewardship or in your charitable giving. And if you really want to dig deep, calculate what percentage your charitable giving is of your net income and compare that number to the number of your non-essential spending. And if you really don't want to do that much math, just look at your combined monthly cable, internet, and phone bill and compare that to your monthly stewardship and charitable giving. Homework. St. Basil the Great taught, the bread in our cupboard belongs to the hungry man. The coat hanging unused belongs to the one who needs it. The shoes rotting in our closet belong to the one who has no shoes. And the money we hoard belongs to the poor. So when we look at our closets and cupboards, how much of what we own do we actually use? And what could we be sharing with the poor? Look at those things and consider they're not actually yours. They belong to someone who needs them more. And before you buy another shirt, consider if the money you spend on that shirt should be given to the poor instead while you use what you already have in that closet. Now, I said we'd be talking and approaching Lent at any stage of life. So what might be some unique challenges and situations to almsgiving for each stage of life? So for example, what challenges do college students face? Or families with young kids, anyone? What kind of challenges do college students face with almsgiving, do you think?
Lack of funds.
Lack of funds, absolutely. There's not a lot of money there, right? Time, yep. What about families with small children at home? Same thing. Time and lack of funds.
Saving for college.
Saving for college, that looming, guess what? You can never save it for college. Having just done it. Yeah, right? It's a lot. What about empty nesters? Is there a particular challenge there? Maybe there are.
Fixed income.
It could be a fixed income.
Or is that older adults?
Absolutely, for the older adults. Well, here's the thing. I think we can all consider time, talent, and treasure, right? So some stages of life, you have more treasure, and other stages of life, you might have more time. Other stages of life, you got plenty of time. You know, college students are the most talented people out there. And if you can just grab them for an evening, you know, they can offer certainly their time in a way and their talent in a way that can be helpful to others. I want to share some almsgiving ideas that I think that can be done at any stage of life and that don't involve donating a ton of money. All right, so after you've done that homework we talked about and you've looked over where you spend your money, eliminate 3 well-trafficked vendors that you go to regularly and usually get your expendable money. So for example, skip the Starbucks or the Friday night pizza order. Donate what you would have spent, right? Choose 3 alternatives to spending. So for example, pack a lunch instead of buying it. Walk, if you can, to the store or church or your job rather than drive. Have a family game night instead of going to a movie. Lent is 40 days, as we know. Can you look around your house and find 40 items that you could be donating to those in need? You may have seen some people are doing a 40-day, 40-bag challenge. Have you heard this?
Oh, I'd love to do that.
Bag.
Not allowed.
You're not allowed to do that?
No, I would love to, we're not allowed.
Hands are tied.
There's an organization in our neighborhood that when you donate, they leave you this giant yellow bag and then you refill and you leave it out for them. But there's constantly this yellow bag in our closet that we're trying to fill. All right. choose 3 causes that you really want to support. Pick some local, pick some international. Of course, don't forget your own parish. The Metropolis has some great opportunities for giving right now too. Project Hope is your parish doing Project. I think most parishes are doing Project Hope. But if you're doing items 1 and 2 and aren't eating meat and aren't eating dairy, you will have some extra funds that you can donate. But also, again, think of giving of your time as well. So before I move on, I want to address a common concern at most stages of life, and that's the problem of time, right? We're all so busy, or so we think. On average, cell phone users look at their phones 144 times a day. Easily, right? As easily as busted. Per day, Americans spend an average of 4 hours and 30 minutes on their phones. That's up 52% since 2022, just in 2 years. The most common activities are checking email, taking photos, and surfing the internet or scrolling through apps, right? So let me ask you this. Would everyone say that we all waste at least 15 minutes a day on our cell phones or on our computers? Just 15 minutes. Raise your hand if you think you waste 15 minutes a day on your screens. Yeah. Pretty much everyone. All right. So, given that we're all in agreement that we waste 15 minutes a day, then that means that we have 15 minutes we could be spending in a more spiritually enlightening and productive way, right? So turning now to prayer, I'm going to offer up a 15-minute solution to improve your spiritual life this Lent. And I believe anyone at any stage of life can do this, and we can even teach our small children this. That is 5 minutes a day of scripture, 5 minutes of prayer, 5 minutes of silence. If this were a retreat and I had half a day, we would spend 5 minutes in silence. And the experience of that can be very uplifting and moving, and sometimes even a little disturbing because we're not used to being still and being quiet. But when we take that 15 minutes and practice these 3 very simple things, we will, I promise you, grow closer to God. There's actually an important practice in mental health right now that's getting a lot of attention, a lot of use, a lot of research, and that's the practice of mindfulness. Is anyone familiar with mindfulness? A few people? All right. The idea is to live in the moment, right? Be truly present in the here and now and become aware of your senses. The practice of mindful meditation is essentially what the Church Fathers taught about silence, stillness, and solitude, who we heard about from St. Gregory Palamas this past Sunday, right? Our church teaches us to practice silence and stillness, and this practice is really supported by the research as well as healthy for everyone. So 15 minutes a day. Would you all agree that no matter what stage of life you're in, you could do 15 minutes a day? Great. Could we teach our kids to do this? What do you think? Yeah? I see people nodding. Yeah, I think so. All right. So, as I said earlier, improving your Lenten practice means starting where you are and are increasing. So let's say you are maybe already at 15 minutes a day, or you're going to start that this week. If you want to increase, you could also consider praying the hours. It's a significant way to improve your prayer life in a very meaningful way. The church teaches that there are times throughout the day when we can stop and pray. Jen Hatmaker, who is the author of one of my favorite books, which is called 7: An Experimental Mutiny Against Excess, She calls praying the hours prayer pauses and breathing spells for the soul. When you frame prayer that way, doesn't that sound enticing? I could use a prayer pause throughout my day, right? So the hours are relatively short sets of prayers for the daily cycle that mark the principal hours of the day. And in each of these hours, there are specific reflections that we can stop and read. How many of you are aware of or use the daily Bible reading app that the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese puts out? I don't know if you're aware of it, but there are prayers that show up with the scripture reading that change throughout the day. Those hours are right in your phone. All right, that is a good use for your phone. If you don't have the daily Bible reading app, you need to download that. That is a good use of your screen. So the first hour is at daybreak. We ask God to guard us from everything that could harm us, either in body or soul. And the prayer is, to you I pray, O Lord, in the morning hear my voice. The third hour is about 9 a.m. and is the hour when the Holy Spirit came down upon the apostles on Pentecost. We give thanks to God for this gift and ask that he never deprive us of the fruits and grace of the Spirit. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. The sixth hour is midday, and we say, give ear, O God, unto my prayer, and disdain not my supplication. I have cried unto God, and the Lord heard me. The ninth hour, may my prayer come near before you, O Lord, according to your word, give me understanding. And the 11th hour, at last, bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord, my God, you have been magnified exceedingly.
I'm not sure I understand. So you're saying every day it's the same words that come up?
It's the same hours,
okay.
Yep. And you can, by the way, there's a new book that just came out this past year by Sister Vasa Laren, and it's called Praying in Time. It's just a short little book, like, I don't know, 100 pages. And she goes through all of the hours, the meaning, the significance, and she's got them right there in that book. So if you're staying off your screen and you don't want to open your Bible app, you can find it and find it elsewhere. Father, where else would you find them?
I mean, I'm bad. I use technology, so
Yeah,
even like for me,
okay.
I mean, really do. So like even for when I'm doing the hours or I read, it's easy. I mean, even like you said, the daily readings. Go to Ancient Faith. You can purchase it there. I mean, we have some in our bookstore, and they're usually that small prayer book. And it is. It's really called. You'll see it's called the Daily Office, and it's broken up into the hours, and it'll go from morning till, as you pointed out, first all the way to the ninth hour. And then it's just a cycle of the daily prayer cycle.
And here's one thing to know about the hours, is they don't take an hour. They're actually
very short.
They're very short. I don't know, I mean, they're called that because they correspond to the hours, but they are not actually long prayers. So here's a challenge for you, all right? Consider adding or increasing the rule of prayer in your daily routine. I told you I was practical, so I'm going to make some suggestions. Praying throughout the day could be as simple as saying the Lord's Prayer when you wake up, a pause at lunch to pray for those in need, and a prayer of thanksgiving for bed. So if you're not in a habit of a rhythm of prayer throughout the day, those are 3 simple ways to go about it. I once heard a priest say that he starts every day with the simple prayer, here I am, Lord, here I am. You know, just offer yourself, right? God will answer that. Pick times of day that you can consistently maintain, usually before meals. That's a good place to start if you're not doing it already. If you really want to establish the habit, here's where technology can be helpful. Set alarms on your phone, on your watch, even on your computer, until the habit is firmly established. And keep a prayer list. And that way when people say to you, will you pray for me, or will you pray for my father, you'll do it because you're going to write it down, right? Okay. So turning now to fasting, we ask the question, why do we fast? St. John Chrysostom says it better than any. He says, when we do without food, we are reminded that the only true and lasting source of joy is spiritual. So we are to break our attachment to material things to compel us to spiritual things. He also says, if we are truly to show compassion to the poor, we must experience within our own bodies the consequences of poverty. Fasting is thus an incentive towards generosity, and the money saved during a fast can readily be given to relieve the enforced hunger of others. Can't really say it better than that. So I think fasting, even more than the other two disciplines of almsgiving and prayer, can perhaps be the most challenging and confusing across all stages of life. Right? People have a lot of questions, like, what if they need a special diet because of illness or pregnancy or some other life circumstance? What if they're a growing teenager and need more protein and dairy? What if they're married to someone who's not Orthodox? What if they have small children in the house and don't want to cook 3 different meals, right? I hope that what I share now will be helpful in considering answers to these questions, but always ask your priest. Father Chris can answer those questions, and yeah, if you're not sure, don't just try and figure it out yourself, right? Anyone here have young kids at home? Okay. What about teenagers? Does anyone have teenagers at home? Okay, so there are parents in the room with kids at home. How do you explain fasting to your small children? How do you explain it? I won't put you on.
Well, no, it's good. So we started with like Luke and Presbyter and I. We tell them that it's a opportunity for us to we can get whatever we want when we want it. So it's giving us a challenge to try to refrain from that by trying something different. So we're kind of like throwing the curveball of more vegetables, or maybe, giving them to try a shrimp or a fish, so that they're seeing something different, so they can also get an appreciation for what they have.
Great.
And I think that's also another focus too, because we're always so driven on the negative, as you said, especially like, I actually said that Sunday,
right?
lentils, fasolada, my life, oh, woe is me, and stuff like that. When in reality, not only do we have it good, it's beyond. And I think it kind of gives us the opportunity to self-reflect.
Yeah.
And so we're even trying for Oberlin. So like on Wednesdays and Fridays, like he'll eat, he'll go to school and have like a grilled cheese, okay, instead of actually meat. And he says it.
Yeah.
Even it was funny. The middle one said something, I don't know what it was, whether it was regarding like a fast food or whatever, and he like screamed in the car, Lent! Like a warning. It was really funny. So we all started laughing, but they pick up, and it has to be an application.
Absolutely.
It has to be applied by the parents, so that they can recognize it as a younger one as well too. So
absolutely.
it's a team effort.
Absolutely. Our son, we have 2 boys who are now young adults, but when the older one was about 7, he noticed that we were fasting, and he wanted to do what we were doing. It was ridiculously easy. I wish everybody would have it. But then the younger one, who Sophia knows well, was like, we didn't have to do that. Mom said we didn't have to do it. Well, we're doing it now. But I think what you can say to your kids is something like, we fast because Jesus told us to fast, and we're Orthodox Christians, and we try and live like Jesus lived. And in that way, you're teaching obedience, and you're teaching Christ as our model. For older kids, you can start to explain exactly what St. John Chrysostom taught all those years ago that still makes sense today. And I firmly believe that when we teach kids to fast, that by the time they're teenagers, they are adapted to that and they develop a better sense of self-discipline in other areas of their lives as well. So just to be, make sure that we're all on the same page on the fasting rules of the church. No meat, no animal products, dairy, eggs, lard, those types of things. No fish with a backbone, no olive oil or wine. I think olive oil and wine are okay on the weekend. I once heard Metropolitan Ware speak at our parish, St. Peter and Paul, and he said, eat only what comes from the ground. So if you're not sure, did it start out as a plant? Probably okay, right? And think about quantity as well. Again, how do you apply these guidelines of the church? Start where you are and increase and keep it simple. So again, if you are accustomed to fasting throughout the year, increase it during Lent. If you don't typically fast throughout the year, start. Maybe do the first week and the last week. Listen to what Father Chris tells you to do about fasting. Don't take the advice from me. But do something. We can all do something. And again, keep it simple. So, what's our time? Yep.
They're listening.
Okay.
That's the key.
That's the key. All right.
You're winning.
All right. All right. Well, then let me ask you this. All right. A little exercise. In the interest of keeping it simple, I think it's great if every family has those 3 or 4 meals that they know everybody will eat, that are super simple, and you always have the ingredients on hand. So if you're busy on a weeknight, and you don't have time to cook, you've got that one thing that is either already prepared in your freezer or that you can throw together in under half an hour. So I'm curious, here's where we can share ideas. What are some of those meals for those of you here? What are your simple, easy, I can throw that together in 15 minutes, not complicated meals? Spana chorizo? That doesn't take too long?
No.
Oh, easy? Great, you must have a good recipe. I'll have to get that from you. What else?
Lenten soup.
Lentil soup. Any soup, I think. There are many kinds of soup. Yeah, for
But
sure.
what do you tell the 4-year-old when he says, I will eat the greens, but I want 2 haggis without the bun?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You want what? 2 what?
4-year-old.
A 4-year-old.
What is he
Yeah.
2 hot dogs without the bun?
Oh, that was my son Elias. Yeah.
And the greens.
I'll fast from the bun, but give me the hot dog? Yeah, no, that doesn't work. 4 might be a little young. You can ease them into it, perhaps. In the back?
Macaronia.
Macaronia, of course. Yes. Other people. Yeah.
I eat zucchini and eggs. I eat zucchini and rice.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you to speak.
I said I did this last week because I had a lot of vegetables, pasta, beans, potatoes, carrots, and it makes an amazing soup, and it's real hearty.
Great.
Yeah.
Make a big salad.
What vegetables are in the fridge? Throw them in the pot. I'm sorry, was there someone?
Spanakorizo.
Spanakorizo. All right, that's 2 votes for spanakorizo. I've discovered the wonder of tofu this season. And I've been making a killer tofu taco under 20 minutes. Ask me for my recipe later.
It's true.
It's true. How many times have we had them already? Yeah.
What's the issue with olive oil?
The issue, all right, here's my understanding, Father Chris, correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding about olive oil is that it used to be kept in animal skins, and therefore it was considered I don't know.
So as
It's-
The
process.
animal. Is that your
Hold on,
understanding?
correct, but modern day, what is olive oil? What do you use it for?
So it's
No, look, everything. It's an enhancer. So it goes back to her statements before. The reason why we refrain from it is to simplify. So in other words, try to refrain from these things that enhance whatever you eat. I mean, it is. I mean, think about why we don't put cheeses. Why do we put? Usually, those are enhanced stuff that makes something better. So if we're simplifying it, the whole point of it is to try to realistically, even physically with food, to try to humble ourselves. Try to vegetables, just try to simplify it. So usually with oil, wine is a enhancement or a delicacy. So when you use it in like a more formalized form compared to you just eat sustenance as water, right? So they're all kind of enhancements that we're trying to simplify and not use it. And then that's why they prescribe Saturday and Sunday, predominantly Sunday, to then use those is because Sunday is the resurrection, and that you can have a little.
It's a day of celebration.
It's a day of celebration, so to say. Same thing with like Saturday, because once Monday through Friday is concluded, which is the solemnness of Lent, you're already turning back to the resurrection and the focal point of what we're doing. So it all has cyclical meaning to it. So just kind of look into it in that capacity.
Are people using vegetable oil or not?
What?
Are people using vegetable oil?
Yeah, canola oil.
Yeah, that's okay.
I've heard oil. I've heard soybean. I've heard everything. I mean, whatever they do on the make it, God bless them. Yeah.
What's with the fish back?
Fish with the backbone. I mean, I've also heard you're not supposed to eat any type of like creature with blood or like something about veins into that manner. I don't know. Shrimp for some reason, scallops, across those kind of seafood, lobster technically. I mean, you could eat that. I mean, you technically could say you can eat that stuff, but the problem is with lobster, it's very fancy.
It's expensive.
And it's some people it's a luxury. It's higher than most meats technically. So that's where it's like you're going into like a great question of like overthinking,
Right.
and we just need to kind of like simplify it. I think that's why you'll see someone we'll do like on a Sunday they'll do like a shrimp and pasta meal, right? Because it's just something that they're adding for sustenance. For the pasta, for people to just enjoy in celebration, yet still realizing a type of moderation where in turn we would put chicken, pork, or some type of meat that's heartier or greater. So the backbone, again, I've heard of the backbone. I've also been told like with blood, again, it kind of goes back to like what Metropolitan Carlos Oswera, blessed memory, said. He's like, if you have a question, then more so just think of what you would eat that would come from the ground. Simplified in that manner.
A can of beans or a lobster, which is more simple.
Never get lobster.
There weren't any in the Dead Sea.
All right, so as Orthodox, oh yeah,
I just wanted to say something the
Please.
way I feel about fasting.
sure.
And I want all of you to know that I'm not a good faster because of some issues that I have. But I think our problem is that we think more of food than we think of the meaning of fasting. That we don't really concentrate on Christ and the reason we fast, and we concentrate on what we're going to eat. And we make food more important than the most important thing. I think that is our problem.
And that is exactly why the advice tonight is to simplify so that you're not spending so much time thinking about it. And part of the point of everybody sharing their quick meal is for ideas that we can then simply execute and not have to go through cookbooks. Okay, what doesn't have meat in it? None of that, right? I agree. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So as Orthodox, we don't give things up for Lent, right? We don't just give up candy or give up potato chips. We fast as a community by abstaining from particular foods together. But I do want to address the possibility of non-food fasts as a personal fast. Remember I said that our practices are personal and communal. So we fast from those items I just listed as a community, we can have a personal fast in addition to, not instead of, the communal fast. So I'm wondering if anyone has tried any of these, fasting from TV, radio, social media, video games, gossip, complaining. What did you say? Technology in general, right? Has anyone, all right, so when I don't know how many of you were here last year, but last year I put forth the idea of fasting from technology and from complaining. Was anyone here last year that remember that? Yeah? Has anyone, not to put you on the spot, but has anyone tried a technology or a complaining or a fast from any of these? Have you tried it? And how did it go? Yeah.
With me, I feel like when I put some of these already happen when I just like have more focus on like my prayer, or if I'm spending more time like reading like a religious book, then I don't watch TV that night. Or so I feel like I don't really plan it. Sometimes it just happens. But also like the first week, like week and a half, I felt like I was going pretty strong, and now it's kind of like this up and down.
The mid-Lent dip.
Yeah.
That's why we're here to talk about it, right? What can we do to moving forward? Thank you for sharing that. And I think you make a really interesting point that when you try and do more spiritual reading or more prayer, when you're coming to church more often, you are fasting from these things, even if you're not really consciously saying, I'm not going to watch TV, but you're going to church. No one's got the TV on tonight, right? No one's mindlessly scrolling social media tonight. So I would propose that we all try a digital fast. I talked about this last year, and I'm going to talk about it again because it's that important in my opinion. So, and it's important because we're hearing more and more about the negative effects of screen time on mental health and health in other ways as well. There is a French Orthodox professor named Dr. Jean-Claude Larcher who talks about how our excessive use of digital media is actually impacting our spiritual health. He's got a whole book out. It's called The New Media, I believe is the name of it. Great book. And he has called for all Orthodox churches to introduce an explicit abstinence from internet and social media during periods of fasting. So this would allow us to sort of regularly have a digital detoxification, let's say, or a decluttering for the purpose of developing our spiritual life. So last year when I spoke here, I read a passage from one of his articles, and I'm going to read the exact same one again because I think it's that good. All right. So he says, the abuse of the new media, meaning our technology, which has become common, produces effects contrary to those sought by abstinence and fasting. And our use of media causes the vain exhaustion of energy, incessant internal movement and noise, an invasive occupation of time, the impossibility of establishing or maintaining inner peace, and the distraction of the attention and concentration necessary for vigilance and prayer.
Cool.
So he's asserting that our screen time really is working against our fasting efforts. And so if we're really trying to stay on that path, our technology is going to disrupt it every time. Now, I don't know of studies that support it, but I do know of studies that support how our technology disrupts our attention. So we know that. There's plenty of literature on that. So of course it disrupts it for our prayer life too, right? So here's what I would suggest for a digital fast. Here's what it would look like, okay? begin by evaluating your screen usage and then set a goal for decreasing. You can look in your phone and it will tell you how much you're using it in the screen time app or the digital well-being app if you have an Android. So what are your daily minutes and hours? Which apps are you using the most? Your phone will help you figure this out and help you decrease. So consider that you can abstain or at least drastically reduce entertainment websites, apps, television, video games, anything that is non-essential, right? We talked about non-essential spending, non-essential screen use, put it aside. Limit internet and app use to strictly work and studies. That's a good way of reducing. Orthodox sites providing religious reading are okay, but it's really better to read books, except that daily Bible reading app that updates the prayers throughout the day. I think that's really great. Why did I buy an alarm clock on here?
Remind us on an alarm.
Pardon?
To set your limits as to how much time you're spending, set an alarm.
No, but that's a great idea.
I think I know because I've considered it.
Yeah.
I always have my cell phone next to me to check the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's very,
right.
Like, you want to use the phone for maybe one quick look before I go to bed or whatever.
Exactly.
If you don't bring your cell phone near you when you're sleeping.
Bingo. And I think that this is especially important for our teenagers, that they have an alarm clock so that they can charge their phone outside the bedroom. And so, come to the end. In summary, remember to balance prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. Start where you are and increase your effort. Regularly reevaluate your efforts. But again, this is the week to do it. How are we doing so far? What else can we do? And again, think about your Lenten practices as personal and communal, and keep it simple. That's what I have for you tonight. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
I think you mentioned some of it last year. Can you briefly touch on spiritual health, the spiritual health of the individual, like prayer, fasting, and all this goes, but the correlation to mental health that goes with it.
Yeah. So you want me to?
Yeah, just touch on the connection to mental health, right? To the mental health of these spirits. Obviously, the digital fast is one that applies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up. I was preparing for another talk I'm giving next week, actually, and I wish I had it in front of me right now. I'd have to dig through my computer, but I was just reading this week about studies relating participation in religious practices and mental health in adolescents in particular. And what they are finding, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they were high, right? So adolescents who go to church once a week are in general more positive and experience less mental distress than adolescents who don't ever go. And the same is true, there's similar numbers for the practice of prayer and meditation as well. Does that answer your question?
Just to touch on that.
Yeah.
Correlation to mental health.
Yeah, well, I just recently, again, preparing for a different talk and reading all of this, and believe it or not, Harvard University has a whole website. It's called the Flourishing Project, and they are the ones that are studying this correlation, that particular center at Harvard.
Interesting.
Yeah, right?
Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Anyone else?
The only thing I want to add, and
Please.
obviously Dr. Randa's was very informative and inspirational, her talk tonight. I think one correlation that we all have to realize is that with fasting, just like anything else in the spiritual recognition with our faith in God, is that it is unique and it is individualized. I think that's our biggest issue as Christians. We want a cookie cutter, tell me A to Z so I can be saved. Tell me A to Z so I know this is correct. And I think that's always the biggest conflict that I think is always the oversight, because then her last one, obviously kiss, keep it simple, stupid, is really true. And then if anything, that to ask the question, when I get people that have come to a priest or obviously a psychologist, they're trying to receive guidance. They're trying to receive help so they know what to do, or at least to attempt to do the right thing. And I think that's one of our issues, is that we try to self-diagnose and then self-medicate many times and say, this, I've seen someone do this. I've seen someone do this. I've seen that. I've been told this. Yaya said this. Mom said that. And the problem is it spirals, and so when it spirals that people don't connect with it, then they say, well, I'm not going to do it. And then it becomes a non-practiced habit, and then we kind of build a callus to it. So what I would challenge is, to piggybacking off of Dr. Randa, is that we really kind of evaluate our own personal selves, and that if we have questions to ask. There aren't, in the Orthodox faith, and any faith especially but ours, there is no dumb or incorrect question. You have to ask it so the person can learn. But I feel like that's the same thing you do at school. You would do that in any other education, and that's why we offer these things, because even though some of this might sound really practical, and it's very profound, because I think we have such an oversight. As Nikki pointed out, we always focus about the food.
Right.
I am always someone who touts very much. I could care less about the food. I said, I don't have a monitor on me to check, did you eat fasolado today and fajitas yesterday? That's you. That's you between God, right? But that's your own conscience and own heart. The question is, do we follow the other areas? Because it's not just a one-shot, pathway. It's multiple facets. And I think that's where we lose sight of. And I think we just kind of reevaluate and figure out and speak with someone to help us get our unique prescription, so to say, to gain our spiritual enlightenment and grace. So, Dr. Randa, thank you. You're awesome. God bless you. If anyone has any last questions, or they want to speak with Dr. Randa, they can.
I have one last question. I don't know if I'm asking this right. Some people, obviously, they spend their whole lives pretty much following, not 100% of what you want to do. Let's say food-wise. Let's say eventually you need a certain food. Some people feel guilty that even though they need it, it drives them nuts mentally that they can't fast. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
You ever come across that?
I think that there are some people with health limitations, or for example, pregnant women, that then you speak to your priest.
Yeah,
you explain your situation.
Here, there's half of them here.
Grace.
She's right. Elderly of age, diabetic. I had a woman at St. Demetrius, Chicago, almost weekly pass out. Can you guess why? Because she wouldn't eat, and she was a diabetic.
That's my question.
And we'd have an ambulance, or two paramedics coming with a cart every week. And the one time her Father Post spoke to her kindly, she's like, what's going on? And she's like, well, I'm trying to take communion, and I'm not eating the word. Like, oh my gosh, take care of yourself. So in that spiritual discussion, which is honest to ask anyone, is ask before, to anyone. Ask your priest, ask whoever, someone you trust. And the true diagnosis of that, we will tell you, you should eat something on a Sunday morning. Now, all I tell everyone, especially to my elders, I'm diabetic, I need that, or any medication. They could be on anything. I don't know what it might be. And I'll say, if it says you need to have food, eat food. I says, don't eat a 3-egg omelet. Eat some toast and some sustenance so you can get through to take communion, then go from there. So you don't feel guilty. I at least feel glad that they at least have that feeling, but then what hurts is usually they deny it. In other words, they won't participate in communion because they feel guilty.
Too, yeah.
So what's worse? You separating God because you feel guilty of the issue that you're dealing with, or the effort you are trying to connect with God because with the situation that you dealt with, which she actually expressed in her presentation too, saying, like she said about fasting, even compensating by fasting from technology with the fasting of food as well too. So in other words, just because you do one doesn't mean you can't do the other as well. So I think that's kind of food for thought. But yeah, I get that quite often. People will ask me, and look, the other isms. We got the Yaya isms. What? I don't understand why people take communion 3 times a year. You'll get Names Day, Pascha, Palm Sunday, Christmas. That's asinine. I'm sorry. Then I will only perform church 4 times a year. What is the purpose of me offering the sacrifice of liturgy, the oblation of the body and blood, if the faithful don't partake? It's for the faithful to partake. God and our unworthiness allows us so that we can become worthy. So if we don't recognize that great mercy and love from God, I'm in essence inadvertently denying God. So that's actually more of a self-reflective question, like, okay, what can I do now to reunite myself with God and partake in his body and blood and the sacraments of the church? I would almost, Dr. Randa, to yours as well, to a really high level, I would actually, if you want to think about the future, because I said that in other concepts as well too, add a fourth tenet, and that's liturgical life.
Oh,
so when you put prayer, almsgiving, fasting, I always put liturgical life because it's something.
Absolutely.
I'm not, please, I can't speak to her, she speaks really well. I'm not telling her what to do. I'm saying this out of love. No, I'm telling you out of love because I see this with people, because we always speak of those tenets, and then we're not focusing on liturgical life, where the people won't go to confession, won't receive communion. And so when I tell people, if you fast and you don't take communion, what's the purpose?
Absolutely. Well, again, prayer, personal, and communal.
There you go, liturgical. Very nice. Awesome. God bless you. Anyone else? Any other questions? Any thoughts? Awesome. This is a great conversation. Thank you. Have a great interval, and God willing, we'll see you at the other lectures.